Okay, so what we're doing is we should be going through this periodically. Now, obviously, I need to do it more often because this lathe may be running every day. Any case, we have completely stripped everything off. The banjo is up here. The headstock or tailstock is down below. Now, in order to illustrate things, I grabbed the tailstock off of the Laguna because it's a bit different than the one-way would be. So what you're going to do with this is to unscrew this and then what you're dealing with is you've got this washer. Now what's important here is this washer only contacts the ways on these two spots here, so that it's very important that it makes a good contact all the way through. So let's put this aside for a minute and look at what we got here. And what we want to do is we want to completely clean these surfaces. Now you notice on the Laguna lathe they've recessed this area and you can still see the Blanchard grinder marks on here, which will gradually wear away. But it's important to take and clean it good. I usually use the DNA to squirt in there, or anything else if you need the degrease. Notice one other clever thing they have here. The center part, there's two set screws. You see these two? So these enable you to turn in and out and adjust the play between this and the groove. Now the lathe has a 2-inch bed gap, and the 2-inch bed gap would mean that this thing can't wobble back and forth. So this is different. Now what you're going to do is, as I say, clean this and check this surface here. You want that free of oil on both sides because that's going to be rubbing the sides of the lathe bed. Okay, so with that, the last thing I'm going to do is I want to take this disc and I want to take and lap this surface, and I'm going to just do some 400 paper here. I'm going to rub that back and forth, which will take and completely remove any nicks. So this is now nice and clean. I can put that back on and screw that back on and provide these surfaces with some lubrication. Any more, there's all sorts of things. And, at one point we said, oh, we got to use Teflon. Well, I don't use that anymore. And what I use is this stuff that comes from Tractor Supply. And what it is, it's a very heavy oil that's made for the farmer to spray the plow when he lets it sit outside all winter, keeps it from rusting. And I've
pointed at the camera.
This is one.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Good. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to give this a little shot right there, just enough. Don't overdo it. I want just enough on here to spread that out, because you've got to have some lubrication in there. And obviously we got enough on the underside of that. So that, I think, should do it. I'm going to put this aside now and go on to the next part. So as you can see, we're doing tailstocks first. Now here's the one way, and what's different about this one is you can see that this has a fairly substantial metal plate here that and of course this plate follows the bed gap, and this closes. It's very tight. The tolerances are very tight, but because this is a rectangular piece of steel, you can see that the area of contact is much greater. And this means that you are never going to have any problems with tailstock slip, which is quite common on the Powermatics, which all use the washer. Okay. So, that takes care of the tailstock. As we go there, we go from head to tail, except we did the tail first. Okay, so now we'll go to the head. So, I'm going to...
Frank,
Yo.
you don't service the quill at all?
The what?
You don't service the quill at all? The quill?
I still don't get that.
The quill.
Quill.
Quill in the tailstock.
Yes, of course I do. But I can't cover everything. But I do, of course, clean out the number 3 Morse on the one way, the number 2 Morse on there. I have the little green things to clean that out. And if it's not smooth, I completely disassemble it. I pull the quill out, clean everything, re-oil it, put it back together. All right. So getting back to the headstock, which we should have started with, our first order of business is to make sure that these threads are all good and clean, and you're going to use a solvent. Usually the DNA is adequate, and I freely close that. Oh, by the way, thanks to friends in high places, we now have DNA available in a 5-gallon bucket, which means if you bring your own container, you can have the DNA for $10 a gallon, which is well under what you pay at Home Depot. Now, I'm going to take and pay attention to this surface right here. This surface is what everything contacts, and that surface has to be true so that everything else matches up to that. Now, the little green thing, which we use, and on the one way, this is not a problem because this is all hardened. But if you have a lathe where that's not a hardened shaft, you may have to even recut. So I do have the reamers for that. If a lathe with a problem, bring it to me or borrow the reamers, and you can really clean that out and recut any nicks that you got in there. Very important. Okay, so that's for the number 2. Now, these threads tend to get crudted up, and I do indeed usually wire brush them, and I can clean them pretty well with a wire brush, and have that, and again, leave that with some light lubrication. The same thing on the other end. Should be all you have to do here. But getting back to that surface, and I'll come back to this again, you notice on the chucks, I have lapped the adapter plate. So that adapter will contact there, and for goodness sakes, when you screw it on gently, because there's no need to slap it on. And if you don't slap it on, you won't have to use a crowbar to get it off. See, I can turn that on and off by hand. Okay, so this is what we did there, and we can now move on. On the banjo, we have 2 variations. First of all, here is the banjo for the one way, which I'm happy with for a couple of reasons. One is the length. I usually spill that, it falls on the floor. The length is very nice, and this moves very freely. It didn't always, especially at this end, it gets sticky. So what I will do is I will take and unscrew this. I can unscrew the handle end. Well, I guess not. I tighten up. Maybe I can get this end. Yeah, all right. Either way works. Obviously, these screws take a beating because you're really leaning on this at times. So what happens here is we take the screw out, the long one, put it in the magnetic thing. This comes out. See, this is a solid piece that gets cleaned. And now we can slide this completely out. I'm not going to because it would take me too long to put it back in. If you slide it out, you got to get all the pieces back in or else it doesn't line up. Now, if you notice at the very end here, that's always where the problem is. So I'm going to take and squirt this, and probably it's just some congealed oil. Yeah, nothing serious. I cleaned that up. Now, this, of course, slides back and forth freely, and it's important that there's no binding and clean it, work on it. This piece in the center, of course, this is the eccentric, so that moves that up and down here. If you're having sticking problems, take this off and clean underneath here, because this surface here is what, of course, is contacting the underside of the bed, and that has to have a certain amount of lubrication. It has to be clean, just as the inside of the bed does. Okay, I'm going to stick this back together before I lose the pieces. So I do indeed like to put things back together. I usually take the time here when I reassemble it to put just a dab of the anti-seize on there. This stuff is really annoying because it sticks to everything. Now I got fingers on it. Anything I touch is going to be silver. The trick in the garage when we... What?
What is that stuff?
Anti-seize. Anti-seize. And I'm sure they have better stuff. Now, this particular thing is from 1962. So you don't use much. As I said, the way to gain popularity when we all had a garage together to work on the cars. Some wise guy, of course, smeared that on a doorknob, and everybody had silver hands for a while. It does not come off easily. You notice I had trouble getting this end off, so it's important to use the stuff on there so that you have so it won't stick, so you can get it off. Okay, now at this point I want just a little bit of lubrication in there. I'm going to hit each one of the surfaces and double check everything's fine. Good. Now the most critical part of this, and the reason for taking it apart, is this surface here. And the two surfaces involved, we have the lathe bed contacting this. And if you look at this, it looks like somebody went at it with a stiff wire brush. And of course, every time that you sand on here, the abrasive particles off the sandpaper go on there. Now you're grinding in between here and here. So this is really, if we took the time to cover the lathe bed whenever we sand, we'd be saving ourselves a lot of trouble. However, this piece I will usually take some 400 grit paper, flat surface, and work back and forth on here. And what this is going to do is it's going to polish it enough so I can see any place where there's some spots. No, it looks pretty uniform. And here's a spot. I want to just take and smooth that out. You notice I'm holding this dead flat. I don't want to round off any of the edges. And obviously it would also work better if I use wet and dry paper with some DNA lubricant. Okay, let's put this aside. So we've gotten that one. Okay, the banjo off of the Laguna lathe 18, you've got the same problem, but now you notice the area here is much less. So because the area is less, this is going to have less drag on it, but it probably will wear quicker. But that shouldn't be a problem. Now the eccentric part of this is in that shaft itself. So long as this moves freely, you're okay. I would certainly make sure that stays lubricated. Obviously any rust spots are going to be a problem. Ah, now it slides. We'll give it a shot. See, that goes all by itself now, so that should be good. And again, these surfaces you want to tend to. Again, you can certainly use a flat board with some sandpaper and just rub it enough to see if there's any imperfections. You know, if you drop this or you drop something on it, you're going to have a spot. Okay, that looks good. And again, a slight shot of this. As an oil, this is extremely thick, and I thought, boy, I shouldn't be using that. You never want to put oil on the lathe bed. I have since changed my mind. I oil the lathe bed and clean it very frequently. So that should be fine. That's a simpler one. You can see there's quite a difference there. Now, of course, the big problem with this whole banjo is the fact that they clamp the tool rest into this cast iron, and in order to clamp it, you've got to take and tighten this. You're trying to squeeze the metal together enough to hold it, and to do that takes a lot of effort. Usually you're going to want a longer handle or put a piece of pipe on here because it doesn't take a lot. Now I don't like it because when I work, I am constantly moving the tailstock up and down, because the tailstock is the fulcrum, and that fulcrum that you need to control the cut, you want in the ideal position. Now, I'm not complaining about this because I've managed to sell the one-way banjo to fit the Laguna 18. I think I'm up to 12 units so far. So if you complain about it, you can fix it by spending $250 for a one-way banjo. Okay, now what's next on here? Well, before we go to the bed, I want to do the chuck next. And the chuck also involves both the chuck as well as the faceplate. And here's a chuck. I took it apart, and I've done two things. First, I've gotten the adapter off, and now check this, and I can get in there. Of course, you're going to blow it out at first, and then use a stiff bristle brush to get in there and clean this stuff out of there. Now, that didn't take a whole lot. Compressed air would be good. You can lubricate it, it's probably fine. However, when you look at the same thing on the vacuum end the vacuum is sucking all that sap through, and it ends up impinging on those. So you need to take that apart and clean more often. And there's some real gook that builds up. Okay, so on this one, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing this must have been dropped because this is caved in a little bit. So on this one, I'm going to take now I have here a very thick glass plate which we used for sharpening back in the days when we were using tool steel before high-speed steel, especially chisels. You'd be sharpening this way. So I'm just putting some DNA on there to lubricate it, and I can lap this. I'm keeping it flat, and I'm lapping it until I can see that I have knocked down any high spots. So that should be just real good. And this now will screw on there and seat well with that. All right, put this aside. There are many ways to do that. That's just my favorite. So when we have the chuck apart, you of course going to go through all the motions, but the first thing would be to try and clean things up. You can do that several ways with a wire brush, or you can put a wire brush and a headstock. And without a mask, I'm not going to run this lathe, but this is a very good way to polish all this stuff out of here with a wire brush. Otherwise, use some solvents and scrub it. You'll probably clean up. Yeah, it's cleaning up pretty well. I like to have that looking good. And if you ever start spraying some lacquer around, you're going to build up on here, in which case I take and put some acetone or lacquer thinner into a pan, and I soak the thing. If I soak it, then I can clean all that off. Okay, so now look at the individual pieces, and it usually wire brushing is enough to get it. The brass brush works well, but you notice there's a groove here and dirt usually lodges in there. So clean that out. And inside, this is a one-way which has the profile jaws. And these profile jaws work best if there's no dirt in there. So clean that out. And because if that fills up, then of course it doesn't grip. And we'll do all of them. It doesn't take long, but you've got to do it. Oh, I already did that. And this one, yeah, I did that. Now, the last thing was, if you look at the very sides here, now we know that these jaws are going to come together, and quite often you'll get a buildup of crud on there. And if that happens, then they won't seat quite all the way. So again, pull out your board and just lap in the side just a little bit. It doesn't take much, just enough so you can see if any high spots, you got rid of them. That's all it takes. It cleans it well. Do that to all of them. And now you know that that's going to seat. By the same token, inside here, these jaws come together, and when they come together, again, they have to meet in the center. So as I turn that in, you can see there's no dirt holding those apart. So that's good. Otherwise, usually you just some good compressed air will take care of it. Okay, now to reassemble this, again, I want to use, if this is a one-way, you got one jaw with a pin. So find the jaw with the pin, and that is here. There's the pin, and that pin goes into the groove. So that goes there, and I take the time now to put a dab of the anti-seize on here, because if you do that now, at some point you're going to have trouble getting them apart. You know, it's amazing how much can go in there, get in there, and I can tighten them quickly enough and see that that seats. Okay, we put the rest of them together, and by the same token, now when I put this back in, I have it lapped. I can put a little piece of dirt got into the hole, so I will put the screws in to the three recesses, again having treated them with some of the anti-seize material, and it'll seat, and again screw them in. Now note that this is a different size, whereas you have the 4mm on top. This is a 3mm which fits these screws. Now on the stronghold chuck, you still have the 4mm, but these are the 3. Okay, so I have I'll finish putting that together, and I'll try not to lose the pieces. Put them there, and we'll put this aside. I'll finish it later. Do the same thing with your faceplate, and because when you screw this on, quite often you raise a burr on there, and you want that to be nice and clean. Now this is a stainless steel one, and these are lovely. The ones that are painted, you're probably going to want to take the paint off to get them clean. And last, here's a chuck that I just did yesterday, and you'll notice that I have taken and ground the corners off all of the pieces. I do that because when this is spinning, that was a very sharp edge, and if you touch it at all with your hand, you probably draw blood. So this means that it's not going to be as bad. Obviously, don't stick your fingers in there, but it can happen. So I've cleaned them. I got the grooves clean all the way around. I have blown out the gears in here so that they're clean. You should have, again, of course, a little lubrication in there. Okay, any questions on this? Anybody disagree? Gee, that's rare. You know,
I have a question that the point from my tailstock is just a little bit off the point when I put a point into the headstock.
Okay, now is that the live center from the Powermatic, or is have you replacement from one way? No? Okay. When you look at the live center, obviously the point comes out, and I normally keep 2 of these for each lathe because I get tired of taking the point in and out, so I use the one with a point or one without. And if I am sloppy and I bring this up and I run that right into here, I'm going to flatten the point. And now, of course, you can resharpen the point or you can replace it. These points are about $5 a piece. So be careful. This particular one has been in service since 98. And you can see that there are things are getting worn here where that's been hit by sandpaper, sanding. Obviously, it got damaged there, but the thing still works. No, there's no play in it. So does that answer your question on the point? Either replace it if the point itself is bent, or replace the whole live center. All right?
If the live center seems true and it still doesn't line up, it seems like the tailstock is a little off.
Okay, now if you put a center in the headstock, and let me get this out of here before I hurt myself. I'm going to take that out. Now, if I put a center with a point for this, I'll use this. If I put that in there and I bring the tailstock up, these points should meet within a 32nd of an inch. If those 2 points don't meet, then you got a problem. And it's either in here or it's in here. I mean, there's no magic. And if the tailstock itself is wrong, then you got a problem. Now, remember that when I showed you the follower on the Laguna 18, there were 2 set screws there which enabled you to adjust the slop in that piece. And I should think you could also use those to give yourself a little alignment. I don't know what the Powermatic is like, but check that. There should not be any. I'll be glad to come look at it for you. Okay, let's get our stuff off of here, because the last thing, most important, we want to look at is the bed of the lathe itself. And I've got a couple of things here. By the way, this is very useful. Just a piece of plywood with a strip cut to match the bed gap. And that's also going to be very handy for bringing up here when you're doing any sanding, because that'll keep any debris from hitting on there. Now, okay, say this is coming down to the short strokes. If you look on here, you can see the deep grooves from 80 grit sandpaper. Now, I personally would never use 80 grit sandpaper, but somebody did. So you can really see where that's ground in. Your fingers tell you that is rough. Okay, so how are we going to deal with that? Well, I'm going to start by seeing if I can get some DNA on there to clean it. And, well, that got some dirt off. But as I come through here, you can hear it hitting the rough part, because this, of course, is where the banjo is constantly moving back and forth. Let me do the rest of this. And if that doesn't clean it to your satisfaction, you may have to go to a detergent. Now, this is one of my favorites. This is Spray 9. Now, Spray 9 is a very heavy-duty cleaner degreaser, and I would use this sparingly. I usually put it right on the cloth, only because this, look at that, that's doing a better job of cleaning, because now you're putting some fairly heavy detergent to work here. Now comes the hard part. The hard part of this whole thing is trying to clean this groove underneath here. put your hand underneath, you can feel that there's a step underneath there, and that step is where everything rides underneath and it clamps. Now, the only thing I can do is put the cloth in there and rub that and try and clean it off as well as I can. You can see I'm getting something, and if you find a place that's really giving you fits, put some detergent on there and clean it. So I'm getting something off. That notice that it's very, very hard to get at this thing, but it's very important that you try and do it. Okay, now last thing, you're going to end up with some really bad spots. You know, since you're already turning wet wood, if you don't clean it off before you go to bed, you're going to wake up in the morning with some bad rust spots. Now that's usually surface, cleans off, but if you let it go for a weekend, you're going to be really sorry. Now here's a spot. So to get at that, I'll take 400, I'll put my thumb right on the spot, and I'll pull that out. So that has put abrasive right to that spot. There was a burr there. I'm now taking the top off. Now you can see that there's a spot left, but I got rid of the stain. Now a stain really wouldn't bother me too much, but if there's something you can feel, maybe you need to clean it better. Now right here was really rough, and you can see I could take and do the same thing there, but that's not enough. So in this case, let's go back to, we'll take a fresh piece, and this is 400 grit. I'll put it on this, and I'm going to take and rub this back and forth. And when I do that, if there's any place sticking up, like for instance there, somebody dropped something on there which put a depression, which of course raised it up. So I'm not worried about the depression. I just want the part sticking up gone. And I don't feel anything else bad. Okay. And you can see I did indeed get a lot of stuff on there. Now, having gone that far, I'm going to take and spray the whole thing with this, and we'll put the banjo back. And you can see that this now is free. So I'm happy with that. If I bring the tailstock back up, and that's free. Okay. Now, how long does that last? Well, depends, I guess, on how much you mistreat it. But this is the procedure that I always go through. And let's just check the alignment. I can bring this up, and you can see that those 2 points align within about 30 seconds. So, and now with this, I have that much movement after 22 years, there's that much slop. But of course, if I push it one way and lock it, that pretty much goes away. So you have to know which side you're going to push it, whether to go that way or this way, before you lock it. Okay, I think, am I done here? Did I hit all the spots? Yeah.
And what was the name of that heavy detergent, the number 9?
Oh, this is Spray 9. Spray 9, that's available in any hardware store. Lowe's carries it. My favorite place for that is Ace Hardware. Ace Hardware has a better selection of all these specialty chemicals than anybody else. I've tried any number of things, and one of my favorites, quite honestly, is Noxon. Now, Noxon is basically a polish, but it contains ammonia. You'll smell it, but it's very effective in cleaning things off that don't belong. It works well on stainless, brass, copper, and also on these ways. All available most anywhere. The last thing I have, which was recommended by a friend, is called Quick Glow. Quick Glow, I tried. I don't really know what it does. I don't know that it does anything. But it was expensive. But no, I don't use it, so I'm not going to recommend it. But it's one of the many things out there that you can use to help yourself. Okay.
Frank, you said you used a lubrication on the gear side of the chucks.
Yes, I do.
What lubrication was that?
I use the same stuff, the same fluid film. You mean inside here?
Yes.
Yes. Now, most people are going to say, "Oh, you don't want to use oil in there because the wood is going to go in there and get trapped by the oil." And I suppose that's true. Maybe that's why I have to clean it out more often. But it's such a pleasure to be able to grab the key and put it in here and turn it completely effortlessly. So I go ahead and use it. I think it helps to reduce the wear, and there's certainly some wear in there. All right.
Frank, I've noticed that one-way jaws are not numbered. Are they made differently so that you don't have to worry about the proper orientation?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, they stopped numbering them because they went to a CNC machine and got the accuracy to the point where there was no difference.
Okay.
So they even though on the chuck, the chucks are still numbered, and that's important because if you ever take those things apart, to put a squirrel chuck, you have to put the first so far and put the second one in. I don't know if you've ever had. It didn't occur to me, although I sold a chuck to a fellow, and one of the jaws was off by 1 notch. I've never seen that, but of course it was easy enough to take apart and fix. But if you want to really thoroughly clean these gear sets, you have to take the pieces out, soak them in acetone, really clean them, then lubricate them and put them back in. I do that maybe once every 4 years, not very often. This is usually enough to do it.
Hey Frank, Eric here. I think everything you did tonight was phenomenal. I do want to recommend if people don't take the screws out of your chucks and put never sees on, and you're turning green wood, I damn near ruined my chucks by turning green wood and not having the never sees on the screws. I had a hell of a time getting my screws out.
Without the never sees.
What one question to you, Frank, is what do you do any belt dressing on the belts on your lathe?
Never, never.
You don't touch it.
No, but you know, I actually had to replace the belt, I guess, a year and a half ago. So the belts are only good for 20 years without touching. So that's good enough for me. Yeah. And you know, they have the grooves in there, and they fit very well, and it's pretty trouble free.
So basically, you don't have to touch your belt for another 20 years, right?
My plan, you know, I'm sure I'm not going to ever replace the belt.
Well, Frank, thank you so much.
You're welcome.